There we go. Let's assume that's all working. I'm going to start with talking a little bit about my own application. Let me move this aside. So my own application, not because I love talking about myself, but because I think there's a lot of proof in here for some of the things that I will be talking about. So I have a master's in sports science, did my PhD in human movement biomechanics, and then as was introduced, moved across quite a bit. So I moved to Australia to really start in a new field, basically neurophysiology. There was very little that I knew about it when I started there. Then came to France to try and combine the skills and knowledge I obtained during my PhD and during my first postdoc to combine those. And I put on here as well my 2-month stay that I recently came back from at Penn State University in the United States, where I was trained in some animal surgery techniques. And why this is important, so you can see here on the bottom, this is a figure from my application. You can see that my whole project, which is on muscle shape changes during contraction, is on animals. So I moved from basically doing everything in humans to now having an application submitted where everything will be in animals. And so if you look at my application, there are several things that you could consider a weakness. It's in a new field. I've done everything in humans. I don't know much about animals. I need to learn completely new. We'll need to do complete extensive animal surgeries, which I had previously never done before, using new methodologies. So far, all of my humans that I tested were running around and alive. Now I need to keep the animal alive. It's an in situ experiment and so on. The anatomy is very different. I'm used to working at movement and human movements departments where I can talk to people, collaborate, and so on. We all know what we're talking about when we talk to each other. Now I'll be in a biology department. I don't know anything about plants. I don't even know what else it is that they study at biology departments. So you could consider this all as weaknesses. When I consider then the strengths of my application, I see it as a strength that I'll be moving into a new field. I have all this knowledge from studying humans, and I'm bringing this to look at animals, and I want to go back to humans. So I'm trying to find that knowledge on an animal model that we can use in animals. I'll be learning new skills that I can later use in my career to have that combination of animal research and human research. I'll be using new methodologies, so then those things I can use. And I think you get the picture. So I think a lot of the things that you could consider are weaknesses. You don't have experience in that. You don't know much about that. Try to see them as strengths. And really for this application as well, this grant call, it's all about training as well and trying to learn new skills, being in a new environment. So try and use that. Try and really see what could be weaknesses, try and turn them into strengths. Step out of your comfort zone. I think this is really important. Now already when you can, even if you apply for other grants in the future or this one, try and move to different labs, try and see how people do different things. Also same for the topic that you'll be thinking about. Take risk, dream big, really try and think, okay, what is the research that I really, really want to do, but now maybe don't have time for, don't have the resources for, and try to go with that idea. And fit the call criteria. I think that's really important. I think the other speaker will talk a bit about this as well. If you want to just use the skills that you've learned during your PhD and stay in the same lab, study the same topic and so on, that's great. I think you can do a lot of great research in that, but then maybe this call isn't really the right one for you. If we look at, I just took this from the website of the European Commission, where they define these fellowships that they target researchers holding a PhD who wish to carry out their research activities abroad, acquire new skills, and develop their careers. So these are really keywords that you need to try and make sure that they are really spread out everywhere in your application. Just to use a bit of an analogy, every few years in the United States, they host the Olympic trials, specifically for track and field. So all the best athletes, they come together and they compete to see who can join the team for the Olympics. And as great as a basketball player Michael Jordan was, I'm pretty sure that if he would have applied for these meetings to go into the track and field, that he would have been rejected. So just to say that it's really important that you make sure what this call is about. It's all about training. It's about having a really big, ambitious research idea, that you need to go do somewhere where you can pick up something and learn new things as well. So, and also just use those criteria a lot when you write your application. So it's also important for me to say that this wasn't the first grant that I wrote. So when I was in Australia, I applied for an ARC DECRA grant, which is a very competitive postdoc grant as well. And I didn't get that, but I'm very happy that I put a lot of time and effort in that, even though my chances were slim, just because I learned a lot from that I could use now in this application as well. So I put together a few do's and don'ts that are maybe more specific to me, but hopefully they'll apply for some of you as well. So first of all, the ID, it's obviously where your application starts with. And when I started thinking of grant IDs back in Australia, I was really thinking, okay, I need to make sure they really want to fund me. So I probably need to work on the big topics like in humans, aging, neurological diseases, and so on. And one of the first feedback that I got from my mentors there, who had a lot of experience in attracting big funding pools, was they said, forget about all of that, especially for all of these postdoctoral fellowships like this Marie Curie fellowship. It's all about training and trying to develop your career as well. So start from what really excites you. Think of what is the research that for the last few years you've been thinking, wow, if I could do that, that would be pretty cool. Or if there were papers that you were reading and every time you said, wow, I wish I could do that kind of work, maybe those kind of areas could be a good starting point for you to develop your ID and to use this to broaden your skill set for the rest of your career. Make sure it's ambitious. Don't think too small. Think big, but also it needs to be feasible for sure. Think of what is really innovative about my ID. There needs to be some risk, but the benefits also need to be there, obviously. And you need to be able to mitigate the risks, but I think they should be there as well. And again, implement it. Make sure that once you got your ID, again, look at what this call is all about, what are the criteria, and really write everything so that it fits perfectly in those criteria. Make sure you highlight what training it is you're looking for, what new skills you will learn, why you need to go to that specific university, that specific lab, all about that environment, and why you're the right person to do this right now with the skills you already have, and also why you need all of this to develop the rest of your career and maybe to enhance your career options later on. The writing is also obviously very important, and write positively is the first thing I got on here, because I remember when I wrote my first grant, I had to write 2 or 3 pages about myself, my track record, and the feedback I got from some colleagues that reviewed the grant was, they said every single word you got in there, the key words, keep them because they're all great, but rewrite every single sentence. And because they said it's very negative. And when I reread that, I thought it was pretty good at first. And when I read that again after receiving this feedback, I was slightly embarrassed. I was reading that I wrote that, well, I have this number of papers, but I could have gotten more if this reviewer didn't say that and this, and I could have probably published in better journals. I also moved abroad. I moved into different fields. So I lost maybe a month or 2 compared to people who stay at the same university. And so all of that was, I was whining quite a lot. And by just rewriting those sentences, that just changed the complete look and feel of the application, where I was saying, I got all these publications in these good journals, which is good for the field. I did move abroad to try and learn new skills, to step out of my comfort zone, to be in a new environment. So just rewriting everything to make it sound very positively, which it usually is. Communicate with the team well, just make sure you know what the expectations are, how much feedback do they want to give you, when and how. Spend time on figures. I think this is, for me at least, really important. And I've gotten this feedback before. Make sure your figures are really good. Reviewers love to see good figures. I spent at least, I'm pretty sure, of the 2 months that I worked on this application, probably 7 full days on making figures. And analyze successful applications. Just try and get a few applications and see, okay, what did they use? How are they writing certain things? And how can I use that for my benefit? And then it's a process. Like it's a lot of work. You're going to spend a lot of time on this. Make sure you keep yourself motivated. This goes back to the first point as well. Make sure you find something that really excites you. It's a roller coaster. Sometimes you'll think your idea is the best ever. At some point you'll think, does it all make sense again? I can't do this. Just keep yourself motivated, embrace feedback. It may feel like a knockout punch. Sometimes you feel like, okay, the application is already really good. It's right there. And then you receive it and it's full of comments. Embrace it. It usually makes it much better. So try and rewrite things and see it from a perspective from people that have not written it themselves. And also, I find it important to keep it your proposal. Don't change it to everything exactly as your PI would write it. At the end of the day, I think you need to be happy with what you submitted. And then these things come back to a few of the don'ts that I wrote here. Don't waste your time. If you feel like the criteria are completely besides of what you want to do, then don't spend time on it. But if you do, just give it your all, give it 100%. Don't doubt yourself, don't give up. Also, don't put all your eggs in one basket. With this, I mean, you might want to look at applying for other grants as well, but also if you do apply for just this one, don't assume you're going to get it, even though you think your idea is great. Just be prepared for rejection. There's a lot of great grants out there that not all of them get funded. Don't reject all suggestions, embrace that feedback, use it, but also don't accept all suggestions. Like I said, make sure you're really happy with it. See things as feedback and maybe leave some things as you see them and not your PI. Just a few points of why I think my application succeeded. I had a clear vision of what I wanted to do, which new skills I wanted to learn for the rest of my career. And so this helped me write up really why I needed to get this grant and why it was so important for me to receive this training. There was a lot of commitment already, moving abroad to different countries. Also, the Penn State thing was an award I applied for just to learn those animal surgery training skills already. So I could write in my MSCA application, I wrote that I would already been trained by some elite scientists in this area before even the start of the grant. I don't think this is necessary, but just make sure you put in whatever you can that will help your case. And failure, I think this was really important for me to have written that application for the Australian grant and failed. I learned a lot from it, but I've also learned how to deal with it. And then to just keep going and keep applying for it as well. And luck, I don't think we can go around this. You need to be honest with that. There's a big chunk of luck with it. I'm sure there were a lot of applications that were as good as mine that just didn't make the cut. And I was just lucky to be accepted. So in the end, this can result into the big celebration that you're waiting for. And like I said, just believe in yourself. Don't think, okay, my ideas are not great and I'm not the great scientist that can't do this. After all, you're applying for a Marie Curie grant. If you look at this photo, this is from the 1928 Solvay conference. If you look at her, I'm pretty sure that in the male dominant field that she was in, a lot of people said that she should quit, she can't do that, and those kind of things. I'm sure she has to deal with a lot of failures as well. But in the end, she turned out to be that very accomplished and renowned scientist that we now know and that we are applying for fellowships with her name for. So just believe in yourself as well. And with that, I would like to end and wish you all